There's just 1 minute to showtime.
The engines are on.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
When they wrote up the systems and the rule set that we use, did working people get to write a line? What class of men on pen and paper jotted down their clues? Was capital the heart of their design? When 90 million want a thing, but some shareholders say no, which class of people get to have their way? The people read the fine print, say that this thing has got to go, and we'll start writing a new contract here today. Don't you know that hundreds will work and one man keeps the money? They don't think they gotta tell us why. When they say the new social contract, all the bosses will be gobsmacked and everyone will want a sign. Oh, yeah, everyone will want a sign.
Hello, cousins. We're glad to be back with you for another packed episode of Social Contract here on RBN Long Beach, the part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. And it's both of us this time. So big thanks to Jared for holding everything down last week while I was away doing some live stuff. He did a great job. So thank you all for tuning in and keeping him company in the chat. Much appreciated. So
it was nice, just a lot more of me talking than usual.
Yeah, no, I was away, so I got to see it later, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great conversation, or solo conversation, monologue, I guess you would say. But thanks for everyone for tuning in and for being here today. We appreciate you. Remember to do the whole like, subscribe, comment thing, because that just helps other people be able to get to see it as well. Plus, you get notifications. You know how internet works. Just remember to do it. So today we got some really good stories for you. Kind of some offbeat stuff. We've managed to kind of, at least a little bit, kind of talk about some more domestic stuff going on because, of course, everything is really horrible still in Palestine and getting worse all the time. Probably just another few Super Bowl massacres away from them really like doing a mission complete as far as that goes. But we got a couple of other things going on that we kind of want to run past you all. So to agree, we want to talk about forcing, the idea of forcing a vote for giving aid to Israel and Ukraine and where that all stands, and talk about this maybe kind of suspicious story coming out of North Carolina where they are doing a Medicaid expansion, which they're claiming is running very smoothly, which sounds good. But if you were here a couple of weeks ago, you heard us talking about some states starting to buy back some debt, medical debt from people. And we kind of were wondering what was the real meaning behind that. So this also seems a little bit suspicious. So we'll unpack all of that, and hopefully we'll get to have time for everything, and we'll probably or we'll hopefully be able to have some time to comment on some stuff that we're seeing in kind of the leftist spaces online about how people with disabilities are feeling a little bit unwelcome in gatherings and in leftist spaces. And I think that there's a little bit that we can have to say about that. So with all of that being said, I will turn it over to my fabulous co-host here, Mr. Jared, and see what's going on. So what's going on with this aid package situation?
Well, we know that the Democratic leadership is very fond of forcing votes. If there's one thing that they love is when a rabble-rouser comes in
and suggests that we should get everybody down on what is their opinion. Like, it's not because they think the legislation will pass. It's just so you know who's voting yes and who is voting no on a particular issue. If you remember, back when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was full of hope, or had people like me full of hope when she was just getting into the House of Representatives, because she would detail this plan, which I don't think it was called force the vote, like in those exact 3 words at the time, but she was describing forcing a vote. You have to vote for, Republicans just did this whole shenanigan here with Speaker Johnson. You have to elect the Speaker of the House every time there's a new session of Congress. If it's the Democrats for a really long time, now it's Hakeem Jeffries, right? It was Nancy Pelosi, like forever, like my entire life, I think. Like as a kid, I like in my textbooks, it's like Nancy Pelosi is the longest serving, and then it was like 20 more years after that. But you have to vote for Nancy Pelosi. It's usually a procedural vote because, well, all the Democrats are going to vote for them, and they're the majority. That's the majority leader. That's what that means. They're going to have enough votes, no problem. But if you have a very slim majority, and this is what AOC was teaching us, if you have a very slim majority, even 1, 2, 3 reps who don't go along with it, you can create all kinds of shenanigans. Because if you don't seat the speaker is the one whose job they have to like introduce basically it brings Congress to a halt. Congress can't function if there is no speaker. So if you, for instance, for Medicare for all, wanted to get people's opinions down, who votes yes, who votes no, when you actually bring it up to a vote. Yes, you can talk on the campaign trail all day and night about how much you support a thing, but will you actually vote for it, yes or no? If you want to force that vote, you could say, Speaker, or Nancy Pelosi, who wants to be voted in again as Speaker, or Hakeem Jeffries, whoever, doesn't matter, we will not vote for you, meaning you will not get seated as Speaker of the House, unless you agree to bring up a vote for this, or like any kind of concession you want. It could be like, we all get root beer on Thursdays, but you get to make demands then. If you're like, I will not vote for you, you will not be seated as Speaker. Because I'll tell you, whoever the other side is, Republican or Democrat, they're just going to love the chaos. They're all going to be like, nah, well, I'll vote down. We'll help you do this shenanigan. Like all the Democrats helped do the Mike Johnson thing that just happened however many months ago. The Republicans did this. Some of the concessions they were trying to force out of Mike Johnson were things like spending bills need to be single issue, so you can't just like lump in, oh, we have a thing we want to do that everyone likes, and then here's a bunch of fucking military funding we're just gonna like stick onto the back of that. They were trying to bring an end to that, which
border security out of nowhere, that has nothing to do with this.
But they're kind of always on about border security. That's I'm trying to remember the original Mike Johnson like requests. The single issue funding bills one is one I bring up because that's a thing I think should happen. I personally, it's like, oh, it's Matt Gaetz brought it up, therefore it's evil. It's like, nah, that's actually a good one. That particular one is kind of a good idea. I would love if these were single issue funding bills, so you couldn't call like the border bill and then have the border be like 15% of the actual funding in the bill. Like, you would have to call it what it is. You'd have to have your border funding bill, and then your Ukraine funding bill, and then your Taiwan funding bill, and then your Israel funding bill, and you'd have to vote on each of them individually instead of lumping them all together and be like, if you don't want to save America, if we're not vote for, like, you know what I mean? Throw these freaking just smoke bombs of funding bills into the discourse to try and create nonsense. Well, shockingly, the Democratic leadership was not down with that plan to force a vote for Medicare for all. And that's, again, not to pass Medicare for all, just to get on the record who will vote yes, who will not vote yes, who is trustworthy, and who's been talking shit this whole time. Because if you remember, Medicare for all it's popular with, 70% of Americans. It's like 60% of Republicans and 90% of Democrats. Like, it's overwhelmingly popular. That was unacceptable. We were told, fraudulently, this is a lie, we were told that, oh, if you don't vote for Nancy Pelosi, that could give the Republicans control of the House, even though they are the minority at this time. Which makes no fucking sense. But, like, we were told all kinds of lies, and people who supported it, Jimmy Dore was, like, the guy who, that's, like, where he, I guess, gained his reputation, in my opinion, was all for force the vote. He's like, what the fuck, you're lying to us, why are you not doing this? It is unacceptable for you to get elected on these lies and then not even have the courage to do this. And that was when we all were like, okay, so the squad is full of shit, and they aren't going to do anything they want to do, that they said they were going to do for working people. However, war is on the line. So we will be forcing let me go ahead and Go ahead and pull this article up here. Top House Dems gauge support for forcing foreign aid vote. This is Politico.com. Actually, before I jump into this, Nicolette, do you have any thoughts?
You pretty much summed it up. I mean, like, this is the mess that we always seem to be in, is some sort of well, they're like, oh, let's do something horrible, plus also misdirect with some other horrible shit to try to pass through real fast so that you're not paying attention. This just seems to be how the government always seems to work. It's just like horrible shit with more horrible shit to make a horrible shit sandwich. So at this point, they're, you know, I don't really know what to make of it. Like, what is the solution to this? How do you get people to stop doing this kind of thing? So, you know, I don't know. Like, that's where I land on all of this. I don't know, because it's like, okay, they're just going to do what they want anyway. They're not actually representing the people. So I don't really see a way out of this. It's really just enriching themselves. And they're going to do it anyway, you know, despite what anybody seems to want. So all that we can really do is just complain about it at this point. But at least that brings awareness. That's kind of our job here, is to try to help people become more aware of what's going on, how it's going on, and I don't know, keep you in a state of perpetual pissed offedness.
Yeah, this is not because we want you to be like hopeless and just go, oh, I'll just give up on caring about anything. But you have to kind of like, imagine you're going through a maze. When you find a dead end in the maze, you don't stare at the dead end and go like, man, I really wish this was the correct path. Like, no, you have to now try something else. And this was a thing that up until very recently, I was fully gung-ho for. It's like, yeah, elect enough reps. What's that? Like burning down the house. Was the documentary about AOC, the propaganda documentary on Netflix? It's called like Burning Down the House or something. Like, she's gonna come in and she's a big rabble rouser and the whole world's gonna change. And she's just emblematic of this. It's not just AOC. It's the whole thing around her.
She's sort of the face of the fraudulent situation that happened.
Yeah, the idea that progressive voters could vote our way into anything, really. What was the line, like, if voting actually changed anything, they would make it illegal. Like, that's,
yeah.
And they're kind of trying, it seems. All, like, depending on what state or district you're in, they are trying to make your vote illegal. Like, they're trying to make it so you can't vote. Or hell, maybe you live in a state where they scrapped your whole primary.
It's like, what are you supposed to do? You know, at this point, like, even like if you're like, okay, well, I'm going to vote for my local people. Like, okay, that's your prerogative. Like, if you could do that. You don't have to vote for a president if you want to go in and vote or get your ballot to mail or whatever it is. And some states have ballot initiatives, but some states don't. So if you're living in a state where like your local, it's like, you know, horrible Republican versus horrible Republican in your local elections, then you've got this ridiculous presidential election and you're in a state with no ballot initiatives. What is the point of voting? So, I mean, like, they got their way as far as that goes with, you know, they're a uniparty anyway. So everybody wins except for the people. We get further and further away from having any kind of valid or competent representation about what people actually want.
You see when they will fight, quote, for you, like when will they fight to force through an issue? Not when it's things that directly benefit your life. Like, they're not going to force a vote to house all the people in your town. They're not going to force a vote to give you health care or a jobs guarantee or rent control or anything that from your make eggs freaking cheaper. Like, that's never going to happen. It's only going to be,
we always talking about the price of eggs.
Guess what? Eggs are back up in my town. Like, we're back to like $4 for a dozen of eggs. It's ridiculous. Well, no, you see the price labels, and there just weren't any eggs at my grocery store. I don't know if they like don't have a restock, but it's been like 2-3 days, and I live very, very close to my grocery store, so I'm in there almost every other day or so, and I just look at the eggs, and the section is now the organic plastic one, like plastic container ones only, and then a big nothing empty shelf empty shelf with price labels that are like $4.19 for a dozen. I'm like, who the. So anyway,
they're everywhere. Why?
House Democratic leadership is checking the pulse of lawmakers to see if they'd still back forcing a vote on the Senate-passed national security bill. Remember, forcing the vote, a thing we cannot do because it might give Republicans control of the House. All this crazy shit might happen. You can't possibly force a vote. We just watched the Republicans do it, and the people who were forcing that vote got basically everything they wanted. But now we're going to check and see if we can force a vote on the Senate-passed national security bill through a discharge petition. Discharge petition! What the fuck is that? Everybody heard of discharge petition? We got all kinds of new shit shows up as soon as we need war funding and it's being threatened. But if this is if you need to give a baby dialysis or something, like, no, it's impossible. We can't.
Yeah.
The parliamentarian
says no.
I've never heard of a discharge petition relating to the House of Representatives, and I am cursed as like a Greek tragedy to consume our horrible politics every day. And I've never heard of a discharge petition. I've never heard of it being used for good. They've never done this for something you want to have happen.
No.
Which would require a majority of House members to sign on. Basically, the current Republican House Speaker, a guy who got a vote forced on him. That's why he has the position in the first place. They kicked out McCarthy, can't remember. So that guy has to bring the legislation. He has to put it on the agenda to get voted on. And he's just like, we're just not going to vote on it. Like, it's not going to pass, and we're not going to vote on it. And that's why they're trying to force a vote, because some Republicans feel it would be embarrassing to vote no on war funding when their constituents may or may not want it. But then the majority of Republicans right now, their constituents do not want them voting for war. I'm sorry, the Ukraine war. They want them voting for the Taiwan war and war with Mexico and with fucking Kekistan and freaking Narnia they want to go to war with, but they just don't want to go to war with specifically Ukraine. But that's the part of the bill that they're holding up. If this is a bill for only Taiwan and border, I'm sure it would get through instantly. Only Israel and border, it'd get through twice. The fact that it's about Ukraine is the only thing holding it back, and that's because enough Republicans have been threatened enough in their districts. Wouldn't it be amazing if the Democrats were cowed by all these protests, where they're like, wow, we're getting our asses kicked out in the streets, let's change our policy? Yeah. Wouldn't that be crazy?
Who could ever imagine that? Like, that's where you always get you should never feel like that there is anything that you can do. You're always told your vote matters. Your vote does not fucking matter. There is nothing you can do locally, on the local level or on the national level, to get these people to do anything decent or representative of you, when we know how unpopular these wars are, and we know how how much we want done domestically that's not being done, and they just keep pushing it through. They just keep ramming this stuff through until they get their way. And it's like both sides want this now. Like, there's literally no differential between the two groups. Like, they're both working. Like, I really never remembered a time that government has been so efficient. There's nothing.
Oh man, like clockwork. They get that bill proposed and through in a day.
Right? Yeah, it's like everybody's on board of every horrible fucking decision that could possibly be made. So it's just an absolute mess at this point. If you're a person living here, or I guess like somewhere else in the world, receiving a lot of your life bombed away. But for the government, for the United States government, everything is smooth fucking sailing at this point.
If you were in any other situation but government, if this was your boss, let's keep the power relation about the same, where they have all of it and you have none. If your boss, you're begging them for years, every employee in your company is like, we just want a new coffee maker in the break room. We just want a new coffee maker in the break room. And he's like, we're working on it. We're working so hard. And he's giving tearful speeches in the company meetings about how much he's trying to force through these coffee makers. And then at the same time, he has 10,000 times made himself a nicer parking space out front. Like, you wouldn't go like, oh, he's really trying as hard as he can with that coffee maker. It's like, no, man, he could do that shit whenever he wanted. So
right,
why
exactly.
isn't he? What is the reason? Why does this keep failing? Why can the good guys not push through good shit, but they can push through bad shit on a dime?
Right. Absolutely.
Freaking, we cannot get aid to the Gazans the president's having all these private conversations where, but what was it? UNRWA, the aid group that, no, there may or may not be 4 employees that were lying about being terrorists. That shit was cut off instantly. That was
and they
through in a second.
And said that never actually happened. It didn't
even happen.
Yeah, they were tortured into making statements, and then it couldn't even be backed up. It was just like that. It was just the excuse to do it. And then there's a thing about, like a lot of people I've seen online with their heart is in the right place, where they're like, here's how you make donations to it. We, as a country, and then like a lot of the Western countries who've agreed to stop funding it, give like hundreds of millions of dollars to these organizations, and this one in particular. Your $20 donation, which, although good on you, is not going to make up that deficit. This is a huge issue that this also there was language in this bill about, let's make sure we don't give any aid. Let's finish the job there.
Oh boy. All right. Keep
Right.
myself on track here. Going through the funding. With no Republican support yet for their long shot procedural move, Democrats have largely been focused on pressuring Speaker Mike Johnson, who had a vote forced on him. That's why he's in his spot, and probably why he's not going to do this shit, because he just watched the previous guy get booted over the exact same shit. Mike Johnson has quashed a vote on the Senate package, not because he's a nice guy, but because he knows his job is gone if he does this. That's why I keep laboring that point. It's because there is a threat over his head that if he doesn't do it, something happens. What threat is there over... And remember, I do not believe in party politics or electoral politics under the bourgeois American system. I think it's a bunch of rich people sitting around having a house party, and, I get to wear the crown this time. Like, that's all it does. It doesn't actually affect the direction of anything. It just affects who gets to be the big man this year, or this 4 years, I guess. Like, that's all it fucking is. If you believed that was how it worked... We're kind of seeing right now, I was going to say, like, the Democrats need to have some kind of organized anti-vote campaign, and that's happening in Michigan with Muslim Americans, like, fucking salute the troops, people who are actually going to do... the only reason I can't go full, like, yeah, you got to see if they actually do it. Are they going to just go, got to vote for Joe in November, or are they going to actually withhold their vote and make him lose? And then you can do that freaking Searcy, like, I want him to know it was me, because that's what you should want. That's what you should want as a progressive. You should want all of your phony baloney nice guy politicians to be scared shitless of you. They should be terrified that they're going to say something wrong and you're going to be like, ah! Like, if they aren't in that position, what are you doing?
Mess. It's just another mess. One after the next. And I think we're past the point of having the mindset of like, oh, well, it can't get worse. Oh, it definitely can. And it does all the time. It's just one worse thing after the next, to the point of like, I wonder what worse thing is going to be next, because I haven't thought of it yet, but they're professionals at it. So let's see where we're going with this.
So we have we got some quotes here. We have, right now it's whether or not Mike Johnson can govern and do something, says Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat, Wisconsin, though he and other liberal lawmakers have previously argued for conditions on aid to Israel, such as, like, checking where the money goes and making sure it actually goes to the things it's supposed to go to. Ilhan Omar was blunter. I'm not voting for it, and I'm not signing onto the discharge petition. She estimated enough progressives would abandon the petition so that it wouldn't work. You should know that since this idea was floated, they've gone on 2-week recess, so I think it's very unlikely that they're going to do this. I think they're going to try, but I don't think it's going to happen. Representative AOC said she'd likely not... God, I fucking hate... likely not support the Senate package, but she's a fucking Marxist, Stalinist revolutionary.
Right.
Well, maybe I won't vote for
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is her ever-present vote present thing. Like,
vote present, baby.
Yeah, this wishy-washy bullshit of like where the wind blows, where I'm gonna get the most attention and
She's the new Pelosi. I hear people saying that, and I'm like, no. And then every year it's like, yeah, that's, if you like trace Pelosi's career, that's basically, Pelosi was this radical revolutionary. Oh, I'm so crazy. I'm gonna fucking, what's her name? Kirsten Sinema, one of my senators who's now an independent. She was like a black bloc anarchist protester 2 years before she was sent to the Senate, and now she's the one voting no on like increasing the minimum wage and shit.
Yeah, well, that big paycheck and that universal health care does a lot of talking.
If anybody can get bought, like, that's just what it is. Like, They either have blackmail material or it's just look at the shiny money. And it's worked on it. So no one has not fallen for it.
Plus, I think a lot of these people go into this because they have a personality where they don't have the skill to be a celebrity based on, talent, but they want to be able to be treated like a celebrity. And they are. They get to go on talk shows. They get followed around by TMZ. So that's, exactly what's going on. We're sitting here bitching about them, so it's, they still ultimately get to be a celebrity, whether or not they're loved or hated or both, but they don't have to do anything for it. It's, this is happening more and more. It's like the sort of the Kardashian equilibria thing, going on. Like, you don't actually have to have a skill. You just have to be good at being in front of people.
They want an empty shell that they can pour talking points into, and then they get up and they, like Elmo, they're a puppet. They just say the thing that they're supposed to say, and that's who they want. Let me read a tiny bit more of this and then have my little follow-up. Democrats have rallied around previous Ukraine aid packages, but they're split on support for Israel over its conduct of the war in Gaza. So it's packaged for the same reason that has to be packaged for one party, it has to be packaged for the other. The Democrats want to fund Ukraine, don't want to fund Israel. The Republicans want to fund Israel, don't want to fund Ukraine. Also, when I say don't want to fund Israel, I mean like 3 people. There's like 3 total people who don't want to fund Israel, but they all get to pretend, which is why they want to force the vote. So those guys will have to be like, you know what? Yeah, I do just want to send a bunch of money to Israel. Actually, those dynamics could make getting 218 signatures for a discharge petition, a move which rarely succeeds and I've never fucking heard of until today, an uphill battle for aid to all 3 U.S. partners. This is certainly a challenge, said Representative Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Service Committee, referring to members of his party backing off a discharge effort. So, why won't this work in the future? So, the squad member Cori Bush, a Democrat from Missouri, is trailing her Democratic primary challenger by 22 points in a new poll released Monday. The poll, commissioned by GOP firm Remington Research Group on behalf of the Missouri Scout, was conducted February 7th through 9th and included 401 likely Democratic voters 2024. The survey asked respondents for whom they would vote in a hypothetical primary held today if the race were between 3 candidates listed in the following order. So, why does this matter? Because AIPAC, the Israel lobby, they picked a candidate and they're beating Cori Bush by 22 points in the primary. Like, let alone if this was like the actual, and this is supposed to be it is Missouri, which is a red state. I hate these fucking terms, but it's a district that elected Cori Bush. So you would assume, oh, this is a very, very progressive district, right? So like a Republican isn't going to win there. It's going to be a Democrat. So they primary them and they're going to be gone. We'll see how many of these squad members are even still there. I think AOC will be, because she is a perfect empty vessel and changes her opinions. Likely not. Maybe. I don't know. They aren't going to fire her. They aren't going to primary her. And remember, if they can't primary you, they'll do a Dennis Kucinich and make your district not exist anymore. Like,
Yeah.
what do you,
The
how
House
does
doesn't
anybody
listen.
believe this?
I don't mean like the literal like judicial house. I'm talking about like in casino gambling terms. The House never loses. They are completely in control of what is going on, who is getting elected, how it's happening, and it's that's why I keep coming back to like voting is a scam. For most of us, voting is an absolute through and through scam, because there is no way that you can possibly win. And if your vote counted and it's like it can come down to one vote, no the fuck it can't. They would recount that shit so fast and figure it out, and would have a Florida situation going on with some hanging Chad bullshit that they just made up to try to figure out who they can pick to be the president. We are not part of the conversation. And if there really ever was a democracy in the United States that wasn't based around capital, which is basically never, this was a capitalist-based system from the jump, then we don't have that now. If there was a time when voting was honest and it was real and what you say matters, that's not the case now.
Yeah, back when there was no women or dark people. That's allowed to vote, is what I'm saying.
Maybe a 300-year-old system based around making sure that you got to keep slaves doesn't really apply to what people actually want anymore.
Whew. We do have a democracy, but it's a democracy of, for, and by a class. There's 2 classes. Guess which one of them runs the government? Right. Like, they make it's like you're playing Monopoly with a child that insists on making rules so they always win and only apply to them, because that's actually what it is. They get to make the rules, and why would they make rules that disadvantage them? And I'm not saying that
getting paid, stop them from getting all these kickbacks, stop them from their celebrity status. They're not going to do that. This is what we're living in, is Reagan's wet dream here. This is what he envisioned, and this is what we have now. So whatever the hell it is.
This becomes an argument against socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, because right now we have a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Their power is not removable through the means that they give you. They set up basically a little kiddie park for us to play in, known as elections, and at the end of it, it doesn't really matter what you do there because it's their park. Man, I'm just full of metaphors today. Like, we should have a counter, like the Jared metaphor counter. I'm at like 15 today. So if you have a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and socialists say, well, you simply must invert that power relationship. It should not be the 0.0001% ruling the 99.9999. It should be instead the opposite. The vast majority should have political power and be able to make decisions. We need to invert that so we have a dictatorship of the proletariat. And the fact that the word dictatorship is in there freaks people out. Like, oh, so you pick a dictator? It's like, no, the dictator is... oh, it's democracy. We just described what actual democracy would be. And yes, we would organize the system in a way that advantages specifically our class, the proletarian class, the 99.9% of people, because if you do it that way, that's not actually a bad thing. Advantaging basically everyone is good. Oh, so you just want to kill everyone else? No, they just have to get jobs. That's it. They just have to act like everyone else and be responsible for their everything.
You have to think of other people, and that's exactly what this country is great at doing, is making sure that our lives are so bad and so difficult, and that we're constantly living under threat of homelessness and starvation and joblessness, that we don't have time to be empathetic towards other people. Or if we're empathetic towards other people, we don't have time to actually do anything about it. So that's, I think that probably for one of the first tenets in how government actually works in this country would be is make sure they're so distracted that they can't fight or argue or think about anything else outside of what's going on.
You pursue a system that is set up selfishly, which is kind of my point of saying all this. Like, it's not that we move in and, oh, we're the much more virtuous, ethical people. You set up a system to selfishly advantage your interest. The fact is, though, my interest, my material interest, is shared with the other 99.99% of humanity. The kind of programs that would benefit me will benefit the vast majority because I am thinking about this shit on class lines. At no point was I like, and then Mexicans should get 15% more, and then white people should get 6%, and then, like, you're fucking yourself up if you get...
Yeah, no, we're directly affected by these things, and that's the whole issue. It's coming from a point of view of, like, there's people who are making this happen to other people, and there are people that this is happening to, and we are the people that this is happening to. So we're, hopefully a little further along than just scratching the surface of opening up the door to conversation. But that is exactly what's going on. We are the disadvantaged class, and we're a very small percentage of people are deciding how our lives are going to go, and that we're going to be beholden to corporations that give those people money.
The final bit of my section today. So we're talking about all this funding, all of this money, how we need to go help XY country. And one of the arguments that you will hear people who think like me make is that, well, that money doesn't even actually go to Ukraine. If you want to help Ukrainians, when they say they're sending X number of billions, it's not going to Ukrainians. It's not like Jimmy Ukrainian on the street gets housing, food, like it doesn't directly help the people. It's not humanitarian purposes. It gets sent into and funneled through the military-industrial complex, which I identify as an elaborate money laundering scheme for the ultra wealthy who have no nation, the international finance cabals that really run our lives. And now we're seeing articles that agree with me. They say, yes, and we are sending that just to the military-industrial complex. Funds to assist Ukraine are mostly spent in the U.S., emphasizes Biden. So don't worry. We're just really keeping them most of this money. It's like... $2 of every $3 allocated to Ukraine's defense against the 2-year-old full-scale Russian invasion, a lot of hyphens there, go to U.S. factories, according to the White House. Mesquite, Texas, Associated Press. At a bustling construction site outside of Dallas, there are hopes that Congress can finally pass a nearly $95 billion in foreign aid, including funding for Ukraine, because factory jobs in the United States depend on that money. Look, Pepper, you want to defend the what name am I? Look, Jared, you want to defend the working class. This creates jobs. Working men and women need to make those missiles.
Yeah, it's Americans making those bombs. Don't you care about America?
Aerospace and defense company General Dynamics, GD, 0.2. I don't know what this is, like Market Watch, so I assume that's like part of their stock. Oh, they're green by 0.27%. Maybe they've gone up. New factory in the Dallas suburb of Mesquite is expected to initially employ 150 people. Whoa! Look at that.
Wow.
to produce
Our
munitions.
problems are solved.
Set to open in June. Set to open in June, the facility's construction is. How many of those people are from frickin' Mesquite? They're just gonna be brought in from the coasts like they always are. Set to open in June, the facility's construction is nearing completion, with newly planted trees and shrubs already in place. Look, it's a green project also, these missiles. In place at a complex overlooking one of the area's busiest interstates. We want to, is a quote, we want to increase our wages and increase our skill levels and job opportunities, says Kim Buttram, B-U-T-T Ram, Mesquite's director of economic development, who added that the factory is expected to have over 300 jobs when it's at full production. As President Joe Biden pushes House Republicans to pass needed aid, he wants voters to understand that nearly 2/3, or nearly $40 billion, of the money for Ukraine would actually go to U.S. factories spread out across the country, including plants in Lima, Ohio, Scranton, Pennsylvania, as well as Mesquite. House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Louisiana Republican, has refused to put the bill up for a vote on the House floor on the premise that it does not meet the needs of the American public. Like, there you go. You can see like what the article's opinion is in those two paragraphs. Biden wants to create maybe up to 300 jobs, and Mike Johnson just won't let that happen, and that's all there is to it. That's all I have for this article. What do you think?
Just the fact that it's like, they're just, all they'll really do is, it's like they say they're not going to do it. Like, Mike Johnson's getting away with these jobs. Okay, so that's basically just like bluffing. You know, like, you're basically just bluffing to get a better cut, a better deal. Like, you know, and that's how this stuff always works. From from something kind of that seems a little bit small like this to like the larger deals and things, where they're, having these emergency sessions and things like that. Like, everybody's gonna get what they want in the end for the most part. It's just more of a matter of like each side trying to get as much of what they want as possible to benefit personally a lot of the time from as possible. What am I going to get out of this? And this is just exactly the same. So the fact of the matter is that it's all going to happen anyways. Every time that there's pushback, every time that, people say, hey, we don't want this, that is never part of the conversation. There's never somebody going, my district doesn't want this, so I'm going to side with them and do that. No, it's all about lining their own pockets. And that's what this is always going to come down to, whether it's seemingly a small situation or relatively small, let's say, to the, largest policies like, we've been discussing here. It's always going to be a matter of looking out for themselves at this point. And I really don't, being that I'm, just a person, again, not like an expert in these things. I don't know what the way forward is at this point. The government is so corrupt and is so one-sided, where from the local level to the national level, what goes on from here? Like, there is no turnaround. I think you mentioned that earlier. Like, nobody's going to do things that don't benefit themselves. Nobody's going to, hamstring themselves and say, I don't want money. Who wants money? Or who doesn't want to be a celebrity? Like, who doesn't want to be, at these ribbon cuttings? Like, I don't want that. Like, nobody's going to do that. So there's kind of no turnaround at this point. So it's, in terms of this entire aid package, and in terms of them now saying, hey, that money goes to U.S. Don't you care about that? Yeah, of course. That's just running interference for the fact that it's ultimately going to happen anyways, and trying just to win people over, whoever reads Market Watch, trying to win people over to the idea that they are on your side somehow, but they're on the workers' side. No, they're not. Newsflash. But exclusive social contract bombshell. The government is not on the side of the workers. So.
You have to keep the orientation of power correct in your mind, where because you're told your whole life that's like, well, obviously, like, the government is the top layer, and then under that there's these companies who are like, please help me. It's like, no. The government is like a middle layer, and then above them are the companies. The companies will tell them what they want to have happen, and then it is their job as the government to like make that to like find a justification, find a reason. The people actually pulling the levers of power are the ones who own weapons manufacturers. It's your BlackRocks. It's finance capital.
Yeah.
finance capital, which is international, by the way. They don't care about America. If we become a smoking pile of rubble, they'll just move on to the next country, and they have extensive plans to do so. They have already picked the order they're like where they're going next to avoid the Civil War if it freaking
And that
shows
is
up.
the nature of capitalism, anyways. You know, if you let your entire government be run by companies and the decisions that are made by these companies, when they use up that government, they just go to the next place because they are the ones with the capital. You know, they are the ones giving out the loans. They are the ones that make the decisions of where the legislation goes to favor themselves so that they can gain more capital. So they will bail. That's ultimately the story.
Your market will have been exhausted, and they will move to a new market. Then they will redistribute that market, and then maybe in a few generations, America comes back, and look, a new market come back. Like,
sure. And then it just starts all over again in some other version of things, you know. And we kind of saw that play out in the 70s and 80s when America was like, fuck you, unions. We'll just ship the jobs overseas and pay pay disadvantaged people, 2 cents a day to do the work that we don't want to pay Americans to do. So, and then now we see unions coming back. So that's kind of a micro version of that. But the market, like when you base your entire system on capital, the capital can leave anytime it feels like it. So that's why this, we have these economic crashes every couple of years, so everything just goes completely to hell because there is just nothing there. I mean, it is a system that doesn't work except for a few people. So it just comes crashing down. All right, well, let's switch gears.
I wanted to some very quick Google numbers I did, because if we're talking about jobs, I wanted to posit an alternative to building a weapons factory in your town, because, hey, if these wars go away, those jobs are going to be lost. I looked up about how much it costs to build a brand new nuclear power plant from scratch, and it turns out the high end of those estimates is about $10 billion. So that's 6 power plants we could make if we're rounding up on everything of these 60-something billion dollars that we want to send just to Ukraine. If you added in all the money, we could do like a dozen across the country, which would... Wow, that would be a significant power change. So, like, how many people do you think it takes to run a nuclear plant? Because those are jobs that cannot go away. You cannot outsource a job of a nuclear power plant to someone who doesn't live where the power plant is. 500 to 800. So, if we multiply 500 to 800 jobs times a dozen power plants that we could make with that money, like, do you see where I'm going with this? And are those jobs that necessitate death and destruction and horribly unethical and murderous activity? No, we're always gonna. In fact, it would reduce carbon emissions. Like all positives would come from doing that. And your government could have by now, just with Ukraine money, built I think 20-ish power plants, spread those out across the country. Look at that. Suddenly, Texas doesn't have to have a blizzard where its whole grid falls apart next year if it has like 3 or 4 new power plants.
It is. I mean, it's just such an obvious thing what we should be doing. Like, there's been no significant investments made within, the borders of America in, I don't know, generations at this point. We're, living in this terrible infrastructure, this terrible educational and economic systems, just so that these few people can make, scrape the earth dry and make a few dollars off the top. And that's where we are. That's where we should not be having these conversations, because it shouldn't even be a thing. And that's what I was going to actually bring up next is that, I mentioned at the top of the hour that we have this feel-good sounding story where North Carolina is expanding their Medicaid eligibility. And they're saying it's running smoothly, and that at first that they were looking at people who had been denied but were very close to being selected, but then were denied. So then they were like, okay, we'll allow these people in first, and then we're going to go to the next tier of people, and it's working. And we've heard about California banding around the idea of having their own universal healthcare system, which hasn't come to fruition, but they've talked about it.
They might make their own generic medications, which I don't think is the worst idea. I just wish it was under the control of a proletarian state and not
right.
the bourgeois one, which is going to make it awful somehow. Because the idea of California...
Well, the thing is, when I saw this article, my first thought is, this is suspicious. This sounds suspicious to me. And the reason is if you have if you are someone who has like an older relative or parent that you have to help navigate the Medicare, Medicaid system. Now, this is going to get confusing because the words sound almost exactly alike. Medicare is what people who, beyond the age of 65 become eligible for. But Medicaid is basically what anybody can be eligible for if they're so economically disadvantaged that they cannot afford medical care. If you can be
I have Medicaid. My grandma has Medicare.
All right. Well, here's the thing. Medicaid, okay, this is good. This is kind of hard to explain if you've never had anything to do with this. Medicare, the one you get when you age into it, is worthless. There's a few different tiers of it, a few different versions of it, but if you're not still working where you've got like really good insurance, they're not going to cover a goddamn thing. They're not going to cover insurance, they're not going to cover medical procedures. There are going to be copays. You still have to pay annual fees, lots of them, and they don't give you shit. So
you have like, for Part C, Part D, Part B, and
then it's up to you to figure out what the hell one you want. And then now there's like these Medicare Advantage plans that are literally designed to make old people in debt. That's literally their plan.
It's like a nursing home taking advantage of your mom, but it's the government.
Right, exactly. It is a predatory, horrible system. But then here's the thing about Medicaid. You think, okay, well, Medicaid sounds pretty good, actually, because that covers everybody else, right? And if they're expanding Medicaid, that means that these people who cannot afford medical care of any kind, they cannot afford to, the ACA exchanges, which are also nothing, and they can't do these things. Well, the issue is in most states, especially conservative states, Medicaid is a predatory system. I said aid, right? Medicaid, aid, yes, aid, Medicaid, yes. Aid. So the thing of it is when you try to qualify, if you're not, in Medicare age range, and you can have Medicare and Medicaid at the same time if you're like an elderly person who cannot afford, the Medicare or medical, Jesus Christ, medical care or other outside insurance. So the fact of the matter is, this is a predatory system where it is ultimately designed to try to get a return on what they give you. Yeah, they'll cover damn near everything. They will pretty much keep you in really good health if you are a Medicaid subscriber, let's say, or Medicaid beneficiary. But in a lot of places, and maybe you could attest to this actually, you have to yearly go through with someone who works at Medicaid in your state, and you have to declare, do you own a house? Do you own a car? Do you own grave sites? Do you own a lockbox? Do you have any earnings that you aren't declaring? Because ultimately, when you die, the stipulation is that they want to make a claim on whatever estate that you have. So if you think about North Carolina expanding that, it goes kind of back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with states buying out medical debt, because now they own that debt technically. So they,
and they can sell it.
So they could sell that debt and make more money off of it. So basically, this is like a governmental version of a payday loan. Like they say, we'll extend this line of credit to you to get all the medical care that you actually need, but when you die, we're taking all of your shit and we will fight you for it. And there are workarounds for sure. And that's why a lot of people, before they even realize they need to go on Medicaid, need to do like estate planning. And sometimes you need to get a lawyer involved, and there are advocacy groups that do free legal work in a lot of states. But the fact of it is that when we sit here and we talk about, oh, well, they're expanding Medicaid, that sounds great. It doesn't to me, who's someone who has seen how this works, how dangerous this is, and how it can put you in a position, say that you're like of a boomer age or older, and you've got a house and you want to deed that house to one of your children, or to your children, so that at least get the value, like most people have done generationally, whether or not you keep the house, keep the car, keep the grave sites, whatever it is, or you cash that in, you sell it, like you lose the ability to have that autonomy. They would take that value, they would take that material from you, unless you have put something in place, a stop block in place with estate planning, and you say, at the time of my death, then my children will inherit this. And then you apply for Medicaid. So when I hear them saying they're expanding, yes, on the surface, that's what we want to happen. But we need to change the language and make it federally protected, because we can't keep going on saying Medicaid is the way because it covers everything. Like I said, it's a predatory system. Then we can't say Medicare works because it doesn't do a goddamn thing. And we know ACA doesn't work because it doesn't do a goddamn thing. So the fact of it is when we go around going Medicare for all, Medicare doesn't cover shit. So the language has to change to universal health care, or national health care. You can pick. But the idea is that it has to function like Medicaid, but without the predatory, we're going to try to take it out of you in flesh at the end of your life. Because if you think about, if you've got a family farm, if you got, this homestead has been passed down and you've all managed to hold on to it all this time, then you as like an older person or a disadvantaged person goes on Medicaid, you don't make this planning, you die, your children or whatever that were working it the whole time or intended to inherit it, or at least the value of it, that they can legally take away from you in a lot of states. Some states, no, but most states, yes.
I've just, as you've been talking, I got a couple of, here I can flip it into our thing. I have a specific term. It is Medicaid estate recovery is what it is known as. Mm-hmm. And what is it? A key thing. What is Medicaid estate recovery? Long-term care Medicaid in Arizona. I live in Arizona, so I looked up the Arizona one. In Arizona is also known as ALTCS, Arizona Long-Term Care Services. So this is basically like if you're in like hospice, when you're very, very old and about to die and are being taken care of by Medicaid, under federal law, each state is required to implement a system to recover funds from the estate of a deceased Medicaid recipient. It no matter what state you're in, baby. During the allocation process, you will have to acknowledge the state's right to remaining funds or real property at the time of death. So really, it's if you're going to go into long-term care with your Medicaid, sign over all your shit to someone else first and then do it.
You have to estate plan. You do. And a lot of people don't know anything about that, or they think they can't afford it, but there are legal
like the poor people who are going to be getting Medicaid, yeah.
Right. and the thing of it is there also, if you've done this, if you didn't find out till afterwards, say, and then you're worried about like, what do I do? Well, there is some different states have different amounts of recourse. Like if you are a child caretaker of like say your parent or your relative or something, and you take care of them for like a minimum of 2 years, then you can fight it. If you are also a disabled person who is a relative, then you could fight it, and you have grounds to fight it. There are grounds to fight it, but they are going to, about a month after the death, they're gonna be like, hey, sorry, your relative died, get the fuck out of your house. It's ours now. So it is possible to fight it. It's just that if you can, and I'm telling you this as a cautionary tale so that you can, like, if you know someone elderly, or if you know that you're going to inherit something and they don't know about this, you have to do these estate plannings. And so it makes me think that, like, no Christmas ghost showed up to the North Carolina's legislature and been like, do a nice thing. That's not real. They're not doing this shit out of the kindness of their hearts. Somebody along the line has figured out that if we extend this line of credit to more people, then we can try and take something back in the end. And yes, a lot of the people don't have something to take back. That's why for the people who do, who maybe, again, holding up family farm, but they don't make any money off of it or anything, or it's just, their thing, then they, were you waving at me?
No, I'm waving to a guy dropping off a package for us.
Okay, you're like, hey, shut up.
You're good.
No, just the point of it is that people don't know this, and I don't believe that, like, even though the article came from North Carolinian news source, and they were saying it's running smoothly, is this going to be a bellwether for other states to do this? Yeah, probably, once they realize that there are people that they can take their stuff off of, and get something out of. So that is something that absolutely has to change, because what should happen is we should have a Medicaid system, but it should not have these stipulations in it. And that should be how our healthcare system works, that it is absolutely covered through and through. And everybody's crunched the numbers and knows that it would cost way less than the stupid mess that we're in now just to cover the medical costs of everything. It works for other countries for generations in some cases at this point. So and if we can't negotiate universal healthcare in a massive health crisis that has just been basically ignored, and let people just like, yeah, get sick, whatever, it's cool. We should reinfect kids like a bunch. It's totally awesome. So that's ultimately, you have to look at it like, if you kind of made it through everything, you didn't get a sickness, you are going to eventually, because I'll give you a little background on this, and I'll try to keep it brief because it's a little bit difficult to explain. So 1971, 73, there was a strain of some kind of cold started to go through the population, right? And weirdly, it only seemed to really kind of affect the gay community. They seem to get it the most. And people are like, okay, well, whatever. It's a cold. I got a cold. Passes right through. Everybody gets this cold. Lots and lots of people get this cold. So something starts to happen in science where they're like, there's this weird virus that's showing up around a couple years later. By 83, 84, 85, we know what AIDS is, right? And the origin of AIDS ultimately was traced back and found out that actually that cold that everybody was getting all the way back in, the early 70s, it didn't seem like a big deal. It just seemed like just another strain of cold. That was actually it. But it took those years to interrupt the system so bad, your immune system, and infect your entire body with this virus, that it ultimately mutated within people and became the AIDS virus, which became the AIDS pandemic. And it started innocuously. And we know that the C word virus, if you say that on some websites, it'll stop you from saying it. But what we just went through and going through, for a lot of people, was just a small cold. And so the government and everyone is just fine with reaffecting. It doesn't seem to affect kids. So they're just like, yeah, just keep getting sick. It's fine. But so what poses the question is, if it's very similar in structure to the AIDS virus and how that happened, what happens in 10 years from now? Okay. So you could say, I did fine. I got a cold. Who cares? No big deal. Okay, cool. Look at history. What happens in 10 years from now? We are going to very potentially be in a massive health crisis that, was worse than that, because it affected so many more people than that initially did. So you will be needing healthcare, universal healthcare. You can't work because you're so sick, right? And when the idea of the long C word started to come up, the first thing I thought is these symptoms sound exactly like fibromyalgia. The reason I know that is because I have fibromyalgia. I've had it since childhood, before there was even a diagnosis for it. And the way that you get that, there are approximately about 100 different symptoms that work in Congress, but essentially its short version is it's a fatigue and pain syndrome, where your nervous system thinks that every sensation you're ever having is the worst pain you've ever been in, so it's overreacting, and then you get real fatigued from that. So it's pretty awful, but and hard to function. But the fact of it is that the long C word, those symptoms, when you hear them described, sound exactly like fibromyalgia. And the connection, I think, is only just now being forged. But there is another version of fibromyalgia, and it's ME, or it's a really, really long word. ME are its letters. I can't think of how to, myoencephalitis, something.
Mitochondrial.
Yeah, it's something like this. But that is a version of fibromyalgia that is so severe, people are immobile. They have to wear eye masks all the time. They have to wear headphones to cover their ears because they cannot process any kind of sensory anything they're non-functional. They lay in beds. That's their life. They lay in beds because there's no reasonable treatment for any of this.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, go on goofballs, go on mood elevators. Like, what? So I shut the fuck up about it? That's going to make everything better? That's not how this works. There are no direct treatments for this that actually do anything. And we all know that there's no cures on anything either, because there's no money in it. And that's another reason that we need to move past the idea of the Medicare for all into a universal system. And then we need to look at Medicaid for what it is, which is a predatory system. So tying this all together, I wanted to mention something about disability and, some people that are disabled feeling, alienated from leftist spaces. Well, get ready for, a massive amount of the population to be experiencing these things one way or the other a few years down the line. What do you think is going to happen if you've had, say you're just out there, you're living your life, when they said you don't have to wear masks anymore or get vaccines anymore, you just didn't. So you're getting reinfected whether you know it or not, asymptomatically. Reinfected. What is that doing to your body? What is it doing? I'm literally asking you to ask yourself that. Like, do you feel comfortable with that? So a lot of disabled people feel like they are not safe in leftist gatherings or leftist groups because they are not having their people are not abiding by things that would help them, which is like, wearing masks or or making sure that their needs are met in these spaces. And it's very easy to do. And I think a lot of us forget that because we think of the left as an entity when it's not like the right. The right is a thing of a bunch of people united together for a common cause. The left is just disenfranchised people who are upset about the way things are going. There's no real structure. There's no real leadership there. So I know I'm going kind of on a diatribe here with all of this, but the idea is that we really need to think about, okay, I'm not disabled, but I know somebody who is. I need to think about them. But you need to also think about yourself because this is coming for you too. And if we don't turn this medical system around and we don't get the pharmaceutical companies out of it, we're headed for a major health crisis disaster. And I look at it the way I look at how things have gone through this already, that the government just managed to just slide through and be like, nah, deal with it. Nah, this was not handled well, So what's coming? Are we facing another AIDS crisis times like 100? What's coming? These are questions you should be asking yourself in this sort of this idea of the post C word virus.
One of the worst end results of we can go on Rumble so we can just talk freely. But like one of the worst results of it is the institutions, because regardless of your opinions on what all went down, nobody trusts these institutions anymore, do they? Right. Like, they came out and they either lied in one direction or the other direction because they said both versions of every possible. Like, you can find a CNN clip of them saying yes and no to every element of this that is under debate, and things seem to keep changing depending on which country. Next time this happens, because there's going to be a next time, there'll be some other kind of like health thing that we have to deal with on a large scale. It's going to be just so much worse, because even if the government was being completely honest and everything was true and accurate, which I don't believe from them, because like you pointed out, they aren't. It's not that the government directs the companies direct the government. If XY medical company wants a thing to happen, it's just going to happen. Oh, Ozempic.
Right.
Everybody take it and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like the FDA approved that shit. Like, so whatever the reaction is going to be, even if they came out with an honest, here's a thing that will actually help, most people are going to be like, I don't believe you. Because I don't believe them. I started out having trust for these institutions 3-4 years ago, and that's just gone now. Because I read with my eyes a lot of information of things that happened.
Right. You're exactly right.
There's no end to that. It's just another aspect.
It's irregardless of ideology. It doesn't matter if you're hard left, hard right.
Exactly.
Somewhere in the middle. You have never been given a reason to trust anything that the government has done or said, because they'll just do whatever they want. A couple years later, people come out and said they lied so hard and everybody died, and then the government goes, do something about it.
Turns out OxyContin shouldn't just be given to everybody like fucking Skittles.
Right?
Turns out lead is bad for you. Turns out asbestos is bad for you.
Yeah, like microplastics in the water and the air, who cares? It's fine. Toughen up, So that what I'm saying is, in kind of a roundabout way, is that sorry, I'm kind of, my hip popped. What I'm saying in a roundabout way is that you may be like, oh, I don't think I got sick. I think I'm fine. I look around at the people I know. Everybody seems fine. My kids seem fine. Well,
We've all felt weird for like 2 years now, and we got to acknowledge it.
Right? Yeah. It's just a matter of like, yes, of course, it is your right to wear a mask or not wear a mask. But now we're starting to see a little bit of like some rumblings about maybe legislature popping up about face coverings in public. And that is absolutely against your right to safety. That was a total violation of civil rights. Now, if certain individual companies want to say you can't come in our store with a mask, fine. But if the government, a local government or federal government, says you can't wear a mask in public, that is an absolute through and through violation of your civil rights and your right to your own personal safety. And we know that they've handled everything like shit. So it's like, how do you, like, you shouldn't think that you made it through, and you shouldn't think that it's over, because this is going to keep going because nobody put a stop to it, And then if you think that like, oh, well, they gave out stuff for free and then they argued about charging for it. Well, when they ended the crisis, the crisis window, I think last May, maybe it was, but that meant that then like any further boosters or vaccines were no longer covered by the government. So
and you get kicked off your free medical care if you qualified.
So
because of
that, yeah,
COVID.
so that if you don't have any insurance, if you're an uninsured person or underinsured person, then that's out of pocket. And that's not cheap. And that's the world we're living in. And I don't know how we weren't able to push this through during the worst of it. But I foresee, you've got to look to history. You've got to look to history because we live in a society. We live within a certain parameter of events that happen, right? And it's not just like the history will repeat itself idiom. It's the idea that like we live in the world that we live in, there's only so many versions of things that happen, and they happen in different ideations over and over and over again. And when you ignore one, and everybody's like, shoot, glad we made it out of that. And then it takes like 35, 40 years to come up with an effective AIDS situation, like treatment and you actually eradication. Now we're talking about just now.
They got there.
Like,
they
yeah,
did get there.
yeah, we got there. Super cool, but it should have happened immediately. As soon as the AIDS virus was discovered, that should have been funded out the ass. Like, it should have been funded so hard that
you remember what guy didn't want to fund it, right?
Yeah,
remember
and that's name? My point. Now all we've done is just relived and yeah, and he thought it was like a godsend, right? Like literally a godsend. Oh, this is a gay cancer. This only affects the gay community. Well, good fucking riddance, right? Like that was the Reagan's entire MO. They were so juiced.
Reagan's guy was Dr. Anthony Fauci.
You got it, bud. That's exactly right. And who?
It's the same.
And who?
Why don't they trust these people?
Entire bullshit with the last one, right? Same guy. And that guy. Okay, so that
we don't trust these fucking people.
When Fauci was in charge of the AIDS crisis, he was the one saying, don't try the experimental medicines. Don't try the cocktails. They're not going to work. Don't take them. Don't take them. And in the meantime, there were literal people doing buyers clubs that were buying these medications out. Elizabeth Taylor had a buyers club, for Christ's sake. There were people doing things where they were like, fuck this idiot. Fuck this government. We're going to handle things ourselves. And that kept people alive. People kept people alive. People with resources helped the people without resources. And that's how you had all these secret buyers clubs around. And that's maybe how we've got to look at this. That we have to, yes, of course, it's socialistic, which is what we want. And of course, you're entitled to be wealthy. And if that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. But if you have,
I want people to have abundance.
Right. If you have expendable wealth, you are the ones that those with us with nothing need the help from the most, because you are the ones that are going to be able to influence other people and say, go beyond the system and not get in trouble. You think that if nobody really knew about the one that Elizabeth Taylor was running until after she had died. But because you had to keep that secret because it was technically illegal to be importing and exporting drugs, right? That were not approved by the government. So that, but if you're like in a position where, you can do what you want and you're not going to jail. If you can, take the money and the wealth and the resources that you have and do something with them, you are the people that are the most important in this conversation, because you can influence people at the top and you can help people at the bottom. And yes, it's unfair for people to lean on you in that way. But, we've been through it over and over and over. We've got no say-so in this. We have no stake in this. We have no representation. And that's basically, I guess the end of my rant on this particular thing, because I could go on about it forever. But what I'm saying is we think that the last few years were bad and completely changed everything that anybody knew about anything since AIDS, something else is coming. Something else is always going to be coming. And there's something on the horizon with all of this, because this virus was so similar to the AIDS virus that a lot of people were saying it was worse in the way, because it's transmittable through the air. You can breathe it. If you're in somebody's airspace, you can get it by breathing it. It can get in through your eyes. You can inhale it. It can get in your soft tissues. So, and AIDS couldn't do that. AIDS had to be like direct person-to-person contact. And
Bloodborne,
maybe you get it, maybe you wouldn't. So, which is obviously still an issue in its own right. But do we really want to sit around and wait another 40 years from now for somebody to be like, we did it, we got it? When look how many people died from the AIDS virus. I mean, look how many people died. And look how many people died from this last one. And that's where I think that I should probably shut up at this point,
The,
because
the next crisis is coming, and all the things that we know we have to do. Okay, would we rather trust yet again the exact same group of people who are working at the benefit of their class to handle it again, or would we trust the people? I would rather have the people like take a swing at it, because I mean we have like 100+ years of the bourgeois running things at this point, and their results are not good.
And you got to think also, like in these these boardrooms and these Capitol Hill meetings and things like that. They're vaccinated and masked. They're tested all the time. It's okay for them not to get sick, but everybody else can just get repeated infections, and it's okay because, as we've said repeatedly on this show, poor people in the proletariat and just like not the rich upper echelon of persons are considered worthless. They are, anybody who needs any kind of aid is told that they are useless society, and you can't work, you're useless. Well, get ready for everybody. Get ready for everybody basically to be debilitated in some form or fashion. And if you can't work, then you can't have your insurance. So something is going to have to be done. And of course, it's rather sooner than later, but
it's in their interest that you die. It's in the material interest of the owners that you die, because then you can clear out some of the, quote, surplus population. They're all talking about overpopulation right now. We go through cycles of expansion and contraction. Right now, the capitalist system is in a process of contraction, and one of the ways that you can handle contraction is if a bunch of people die. Because now, suddenly, oh, look, we freed up all this new space, because then when you rebound, oh, look, the market's growing again.
And then Medicaid allows people to take your shit. So if you die,
redistribution of wealth
and
upward.
the state gets your shit.
You can distribute your wealth to your governor or whoever.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like they have somehow figured out how to get more shit like yours now. And it's just like this capitalism is so diabolical, because it's like, just look at like any streamer service from the time that it started to now, just a small example. They were pretty rad in the beginning. It's like, oh, wow, they've got these giant libraries of old stuff and new stuff. Now they're making their own content. That's super cool. That's like really, really neat. I'm really about this. I'm going to buy this streamer. I'm going to share it with my friends. Then they were like, no, you can't share it. Also, we're not making shit anymore. Also, the shit that we're making, we're not even going to release it because taxes. And also, we're taking all of the shit down. So keep paying, though, because maybe every now and again we might release a new season of The Boys.
They reached saturation, and now it has to contract again, and all the streaming services are going down, 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 and then they'll come back.
Exactly. So compare that to how, or you'll be watching a show and they'll be like, oh, you ready for season 3? Guess what? Season 3 is behind a paywall. Fuck you. And you didn't know that going into it. And it's like, I'm not paying for this 40-year-old goddamn show. What the hell? And then they show you commercials all over everything. So it's like, how could things get worse? How could they extract more money out of the situation? How could they take more away from you and make it even shittier for you? Multiply that by like a quadrillion, and then you have how our government is working. It's just the way to extrapolate every possible resource now out of you as a person. And people are just sitting around in think tanks figuring out how to take more and more away from you. And that's where we are. That's where we are now. And it can get worse. Like we didn't, again with the streamers, when the streamers started, you didn't think it was going to end up where it's at now, where they would do that, where they would still manage to like take all this money. They wouldn't let you share. They stopped making new content. They will tell you they're going to make something and they don't even air it. They get tax breaks for taking shit away. So like we did not foresee that. So think about that in terms of the C word illness of what's to come.
They do it with people. They're trying to do it with humans.
But it's now human capital. We've always been used,
we got too many people, whatever that means.
Well, we've always been used like cattle, essentially. We turn the wheel. Workers turn the wheel, because we talk about wage theft and we talk about everything that that gets taken away from us, and how much poor people pay more taxes than rich people. No corporations are ever paying taxes, and we're squeezing the lower classes into nothing. Most people won't even know what it's like to live middle class that didn't grow up, and then that started to go away in the 90s. So we're now at a point where it's like they're thinking like squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and we just keep taking it because it's sort of that American mentality, that rugged individualism is programmed into our heads, that we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. If you ask for help, you're weak. If you give help to anybody, they're weak. So that's the mess that we're in right now. And we know, Jared and I know, that we're not, we're preaching to the choir, first of all, but we're also not writing the policy here. But what we hope to do is give you some, maybe some speaking topics and tools to talk to other people about it, to refer people back to us, say, hey, maybe you would enjoy this conversation. We were just talking about this. Listen to what these guys had to say. So we want to further the conversation on these things, to say that we are paying attention to what's going on. We hope you're paying attention, and we're going to help you pay attention and help you help other people pay attention. That's our contribution to what we can do here. So hopefully we get this sorted out sooner rather than later. But I just don't, at this moment, see a way forward yet, unless we start to turn our attention really hard onto it, sort of the way that the protests have been mounting for Palestine. Then, if that ever gets solved without them getting completely exterminated, we can hopefully maybe turn our collective attentions onto something like this. Well, today, Mr. Jared has had some spotty internet, so he doesn't have a song for us. So you will have to wait for our next episode to see what he surprises us with. But we
definitely
thank
play
you.
Something next week.
Yeah, okay. We thank you very much for joining us today. And once again, you can always follow us and reach out to us on our socials. Thank you for all your comments. So we got a little ahead of ourselves, so we didn't really get to read a lot of comments, but we really appreciate you. We thank you for joining us. I just heard that the RB in Long Beach channel has reached 2,600 subscribers after some of the new programs have gone on. So thank you for subscribing, and congrats to the other shows, Noteworthy and Beyond the Arc of Politics. You guys are doing great. And we will be back here next week with many more angry rants and hopefully more talking points that actually gonna get through our crazy minutia. So thank you all for being with us, and we will see you next week. Bye. Bye. Maybe.